confrontation. Yet, centuries later, why has the narrative shifted so drastically? Stay with me. By subscribing now, you'll ensure you're part of an awakening community, committed to uncovering the deeper truths hidden beneath centuries of silence. Hit that subscribe button to never miss insights that will empower your spiritual journey. Consider this: what if the number 666 isn't a mere symbol of evil, but rather a profound biblical warning about corrupted authority? The book of Revelation 13:18 tells us, "Let the one who has insight, a faith grounded in love, truth, and genuine connection with the divine." Over the next few minutes, you'll hear stories of bravery, defiance, and revelation, real accounts from historical figures and everyday heroes who dared question what was taught from pulpits and podiums. These aren't abstract tales. They're living testimonies, vivid proof that faith is meant to liberate, not bind. Imagine finally understanding the real message behind 666, not as a terrifying omen, but as a clarion call against spiritual manipulation. Imagine realizing that you too hold the power to challenge the narrative, to restore integrity and honesty to your spiritual life. By subscribing, you join thousands who refuse to let their faith be dictated by fear or falsehood. As we uncover these truths together, remember that your voice matters. Comment your thoughts, share your insights, and let this video be the beginning of your active role in reshaping the dialogue around faith, truth, and the genuine message of Christ. So, who do you think truly represents the beast behind 666? Type Rome or modern in the comments below. Your perspective enriches this journey. Don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe now and join us as we continue unveiling truths that will renew your faith, invigorate your spirit, and guide you toward authentic spiritual freedom. The Hebrew cipher. Irrefutable evidence. When Dr. Michael Heiser translated Revelation 13:18 from the original Greek, he uncovered a radical insight. The word, often rendered calculate, sephetso, literally means to decode a cipher. This revelation instantly transforms our understanding of the number of the beast. Instead of a vague symbol of evil, it points us toward a concrete historical figure, Emperor Nero Caesar. As Heiser notes in his work, The Unseen Realm, Nero's brutal persecution of Christians and orchestration of the Great Fire of Rome, had 64, cast a long and bloody shadow over early church history. Heiser, 2015, p. 212. The historian Tacitus corroborates these events in his Annals, recounting how Nero scapegoated Christians to deflect blame from himself and even branded them as property of the state. Tacitus, Annals 15.44. But the shock doesn't end there. Ancient accounts, some preserved in fragments, suggest that Nero stamped the number 666 on the foreheads of enslaved Ethiopians, marking them as Caesar's property. This wasn't mere cruelty. It was a prophetic enactment of Revelation's imagery. Suddenly, 666 emerges not as myth but as a living, breathing atrocity etched in flesh. Personal testimony. A cry from the margins. Imagine the dread of an Ethiopian slave in Nero's arena, the scorching heat of a Roman pyre, the humiliation of a branded forehead. These were not distant metaphors. They were everyday horrors. In the words of liberation theologian James Cone, the gospel of Jesus Christ confronts the powers that dehumanize and oppress. Cone, God of the Oppressed, 1975, p. 31. Cone's scholarship reminds us that God's revelation reveals itself most vividly amidst suffering. When we decode this Hebrew cipher, we step into that suffering and are called to bear witness. For modern audiences, this ancient terror finds eerie parallels in contemporary systems of oppression,
and justice,
racial profiling, mass incarceration, and digital surveillance.
What if the very systems designed to guide and
communities? If you think Nero's reign ended 2 millennia ago, consider the 21st century's own 666, algorithms that track, classify, and control. Biblical foundations. Analyzing the text, Revelation 13:18 reads, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The Greek sephetso invites us to apply gematria, a Jewish interpretive method, assigning numerical values to letters. In Hebrew, Neron Kazar, Psalms 666. Crossway ESV Study Bible. Note on Revelation 13. This is no coincidence. Early Church Father Irenaeus affirmed this in Against Heresies, Book 5, Chapter 30, pointing to Nero as a preliminary embodiment of the beast. Modern theologians like G.K. Beale, The Book of Revelation, 1999, elaborate on the cultural context. Jewish and Christian communities living under imperial persecution would immediately recognize the cipher of Nero's name. Historical and cultural context. Nero's rule obliterated any illusion that Rome was benevolent. His notorious Golden House Palace symbolized excess built upon Christian blood. Suetonius Nero 31. Yet scholars such as Elaine Pagels argue that the Revelation's vivid imagery was intended to offer hope. The Lamb who was slain is also the warrior who conquers. Pagels Revelations 2012, p. 98. The Code of 666 thus functioned both as indictment and as encouragement, an invitation to persevere under the sign of the cross rather than the mark of the beast. Emerging from the catacombs, early Christians encountered clandestine worship under the cover of darkness, the very setting where John's visions were received. Revelation 1:10. This historical backdrop underscores the dual reality: persecution and promise, suffering and salvation. Theological implications. Beyond symbolism, theologian N.T. Wright emphasizes that Revelation is not merely apocalyptic fantasy, but a summons to faithful action. Wright, Revelation for Everyone 2011, p. 67. By deciphering 666 as Nero, we confront the reality that evil often masquerades in political power. This insight demands practical response, social justice, sacrificial love, and prophetic witness in the face of systemic evil. Moreover, the verse's sword imagery, Matthew 10:34, reminds us that Christ's path involves confrontation, a sword that exposes hypocrisies and shatters oppressive structures. Dietrich Bonhoeffer lived this truth, resisting Nazism at the cost of his life. He wrote, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil." Bonhoeffer, Ethics 1943, p. 153. Practical applications. Living free from the mark. How do we apply these revelations today? First, we must cultivate discernment. As Deuteronomy 18:10-12 warns against occult signs, we must reject systems that dehumanize. Second, we embrace community. The Ethiopian Church Fathers, Afro-Christian leaders such as Augustine, affirmed the power of collective faith to transcend persecution. Third, we act. Advocacy for the oppressed mirrors Christ's call to bind up the brokenhearted, Isaiah 61:1. Consider modern-day markings. Data profiling that strips privacy, identity cards that restrict mobility, or workplace surveillance that erodes dignity. Our response? Advocacy, policy change, and radical hospitality. Feeding the hungry, welcoming the stranger, resisting every form of branding. The path forward as we emerge from the dark cipher of Nero. We glimpse the Lamb who stands victorious. Revelation 5:5. This victory is not abstract. It transforms individual lives and societies. Scholar Miroslav Volf writes, God's grace empowers us to turn enemies into neighbors. Wolf, Exclusion and Embrace, 1996, p. 209. That is the true antidote to the beast's mark. If this exploration stirred your soul, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Join a community committed to unearthing hidden truths and living out radical love. Share your reflections in the comments. How will you resist the modern 666 in your world? In the end, the Hebrew cipher of Revelation 13:18 is more than an academic curiosity. It is a living call to courage, to stand unwavering against every force that seeks to brand, oppress, or divide. The power of decoded truth sets captives free. May it ignite your heart and compel you to action today. There is a quiet ache in the soul when we discover that the very walls meant to shelter our faith have, at times, become instruments of oppression. Imagine the whispered terror of a black woman in 15th century Europe, branded a witch by papal decree, marked for death by the very church she loved. That is the weight of our next discovery. How the Vatican's authority, once wielded for crusade and conquest, was turned against the most vulnerable. This is part 2 of our journey, picking up where we left off and carrying you deeper into a story of injustice, resistance, and redemption that still speaks to us today. In 1484, Pope Innocent XIII issued the papal bull Summus Desiderans Effectibus, authorizing the use of the number of the beast to identify witches. This decree was a theological license, a horrifying token in the coffers of genocide, particularly aimed at black women whose very bodies challenged European norms. As historian Diana Butler Bass observes, this was the biblical justification of genocide, Bass Christianity After Religion, 2012, p. 134. Scripture, once a source of solace and guidance, was twisted into a weapon pointed at the innocent. The scriptural pretense this perversion rested on a superficial appeal to Revelation 13:18. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. By invoking Revelation, inquisitors claimed divine backing. Yet a closer look at the biblical text and its historical context reveals the fraud. Revelation was written to comfort a persecuted early church, not to sanction state-sponsored terror. As Elaine Pagels explains, John's apocalypse is an act of cosmic subversion. Pagels, Revelations 2012, p. 56. A message of hope that God will overcome evil, not an imprimatur for violence. Cultural and historical context. Medieval Europe was gripped by fear of heresy, of the other, of power slipping from sacred hands. Black women, often midwives, healers, or simply outsiders, became scapegoats. The papal bull decreed that anyone marked by 666 could be arrested, tortured, and executed. In practice, it meant any woman whose name or skin color set her apart. This was not a distant atrocity. Records from the Valais witch hunts, 1428-1434, and later trials in Spain and Italy show that countless African descent women were accused, tortured until they confessed, and burned at the stake. Lagarde, Witchcraft and Society, 1996, pp. 112, 115. Theological betrayal. At the heart of the church's betrayal was a refusal to see Christ in the marginalized. Jesus, the one born in a backwater town, preached to the poor and died on a cross alongside criminals, taught compassion and inclusion. Matthew 25:40 declares, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Yet Innocent VIII's bull turned Revelation on its head, using scripture to justify exclusion and murder. Modern